Welcome, dear traveler, to another gentle journey through the shadows of history. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in wherever you are. Perhaps you're tucked beneath warm blankets, or maybe you're listening as rain taps softly against your window. Wherever you find yourself in this world, know that you're about to step into another time entirely. I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight? Are you drifting off in a bustling city? Or perhaps somewhere quiet, where the night feels vast and still? There's something magical about sharing these stories across time and space, connecting us all through the gentle thread of history. If these peaceful journeys into the past bring you comfort and help you rest, I'd be honored if you'd consider subscribing. There are so many more stories waiting to be told, each one a doorway into worlds both beautiful and strange. Tonight, we're traveling back to medieval Europe, to an age where beauty wasn't simply about looking pleasant or attractive. No, in those distant centuries, beauty was survival, politics, morality, and danger, all woven together into one impossible tapestry. Picture yourself now walking through the heavy wooden doors of a castle, your footsteps echoing softly on cold stone floors. The air carries the scent of beeswax candles and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance you can hear the gentle murmur of voices speaking in languages that would sound foreign to our modern ears. In this world we're about to explore together, beauty was never casual, never effortless. It was a full-time occupation that could quite literally kill you. Women, and men too, though they faced different pressures, lived their entire lives performing an elaborate dance of appearance, each step choreographed by rules so rigid and expectations so impossible that they would break most of us before we even began. Tonight, we'll walk gently through the chambers and halls where these beauty rituals unfolded. We'll sit quietly beside women as they prepared their faces each morning, knowing that the very substances they applied might be slowly poisoning them. We'll witness the length to which people went to achieve an ideal that was always just beyond reach, always demanding more sacrifice, more pain, more complete surrender of the self. But don't worry, we'll take our time. There's no rush here in the candlelit quiet of history. Let your breathing slow as we begin our journey, and allow yourself to drift between the world you know and the world that was. Chapter 1. The Mirror's Cruel Reflection. Imagine yourself now in a stone chamber high in a castle tower. The morning light filters weakly through a narrow window, casting everything in shades of gray and gold. Before you sits a young woman, perhaps 17 or 18 years old, though the candlelight makes it difficult to tell. She's seated before what passes for a mirror in this age, a piece of polished metal that reflects her image with all the clarity of moonlight on disturbed water. Her name, let's say, is Marguerite, and she is the daughter of a minor lord. Not wealthy enough to be completely frivolous, but prosperous enough that her appearance matters desperately. In a few hours, she will descend to the great hall where visitors from neighboring estates will gather. Among them might be a potential husband, or perhaps the wife of someone who could advance her family's fortunes. Her face, her bearing, Her every gesture will be scrutinized and judged. But first, she must prepare. And preparation in medieval Europe was nothing like the quick application of modern cosmetics. No, this was ritual, transformation, and slow poisoning all at once. The young woman's maid, a girl named Annette, who is perhaps a year or two younger, approaches with a wooden bowl filled with a white paste. The mixture looks innocent enough, creamy, smooth, with the consistency of thick cream. But this is ceruse, a foundation made from white lead, vinegar, and egg whites. It promises to give Marguerite the pale, luminous complexion that marks her as a woman of refinement, someone who has never labored in the sun or worked with her hands. Listen now to the soft sounds of preparation, the gentle scraping of a wooden spoon against the bowl as Annette stirs the mixture, the whisper of fabric as Marguerite adjusts her linen shift, the distant crackle of the fire in the chamber's small hearth. There's an almost meditative quality to these moments, a ritual that has been repeated countless times by countless women, each one believing she is simply doing what must be done to survive in her world. Annette begins to apply the ceruse with a soft cloth, working it gently into Marguerite's skin. The mixture is cool and slightly grainy, and it settles into her pores with a weight she can feel. The lead in the mixture will give her that coveted porcelain finish, but it will also begin its slow work of destruction. With each application, tiny amounts of the poison enter her bloodstream. Over months and years, it will cause her hair to fall out, her teeth to loosen, and her mind to become foggy and confused. But Marguerite doesn't know this. No one does. The physicians of her time might notice that women who use these cosmetics often fall ill, but they attribute it to an excess of melancholy or an imbalance of the humors. The idea that beauty itself might be deadly seems impossible to them. As the white foundation settles on her skin, Marguerite's natural coloring disappears entirely. She looks now like a statue carved from pale stone, ethereal and otherworldly. This is exactly the effect she wants. In her time, the ideal woman appears almost translucent, as if she might float away at any moment. Color in the cheeks suggests robust health, which in turn suggests physical labor, which marks one as common. But the white foundation is only the beginning. Next comes the rouge, and here the danger multiplies. Annette reaches for another small pot, this one containing a deep red paste made from cinnabar, which is mercury sulfide. This will give Marguerite the tiny spots of color on her lips and cheeks that are permissible within the beauty standards of her time. Not too much. That would be vulgar. Just enough to suggest the faintest bloom of youth and health. The mercury-based rouge goes on like silk, blending seamlessly with the lead foundation. Now Marguerite is wearing two different types of poison on her face, each one slowly seeping into her system. The mercury will attack her nervous system, causing tremors, mood swings, and eventually madness. But again, no one makes this connection. If women who use cosmetics seem prone to hysteria and strange ailments, well, that's simply the nature of the female constitution, isn't it? Chapter 2. The Architecture of Agony. Now let us move deeper into Marguerite's morning ritual, past the application of cosmetics and into the realm of physical transformation. Follow me as we step behind a carved wooden screen where the young woman must now dress, or rather be dressed, for the complexity of medieval women's clothing made it impossible to manage alone. The first layer is simple enough, a linen chemise that serves as undergarment and barrier between skin and the more elaborate garments to come. But even this basic piece tells a story of class and expectation. The linen is fine, woven from flax that was grown, harvested, processed, and spun by countless hands before reaching this castle. Its very whiteness speaks of privilege, the ability to own clothing that shows every stain, that requires careful washing and maintenance. Next comes what we might call the medieval equivalent of shapewear, though that gentle term hardly captures the reality of what Marguerite is about to endure. Annette approaches with what looks like a garment designed by someone who had never actually worn clothes themselves. A fitted bodice with laces running up the back, designed to create the fashionable silhouette of the era. The ideal female form in medieval Europe was long and narrow, with a high waist just beneath the bust and a torso that seemed to stretch on forever. To achieve this look, the bodice must be laced tight enough to compress the rib cage and push the organs upward and inward. Margaret grasps a bedpost as Annette begins to pull the laces, each tug forcing breath from her lungs. Listen to the sound of the laces tightening, the whisper of cord against fabric, the soft grunt of effort from the maid, the almost inaudible gasp from Marguerite as her body is reshaped according to fashion's demands. This is not the quick discomfort of a modern garment. This is architecture, the literal reconstruction of the human form. With each pull of the laces, Marguerite's breathing becomes more shallow. The bodice compresses her lower ribs, pushes her stomach upward, and creates that coveted, long-waisted silhouette that marks her as fashionable. But it also restricts her movement, her breathing, her very ability to exist comfortably in her own body. She will spend the entire day taking small, careful breaths, unable to laugh freely or move suddenly lest she faint from lack of air. Over this foundation garment comes the gown itself. Layers of wool or silk depending on the season, each piece carefully fitted and requiring assistance to don properly. The sleeves alone are marvels of impracticality, often so long they drag on the ground, so tight they restrict arm movement, or so elaborate they require careful management to avoid catching on furniture or knocking over candles. But we're not finished yet. Medieval fashion demanded not just the right silhouette, but the right proportions, and nature rarely cooperated. If Marguerite's hips aren't quite wide enough to balance the narrow waist created by her bodice, padding can be added. If her chest needs enhancement or minimization, that too can be managed through careful engineering of the garments. The final touch is perhaps the most telling. The belt. Worn high beneath the bust, it serves not just as decoration, but as a visible marker of just how tiny Marguerite's compressed waist has become. The narrower the belt, the more successful the transformation, the more admiring the glances she'll receive in the Great Hall. Chapter 3, The Crown of Suffering. Now we turn our attention upward to perhaps the most shocking aspect of medieval beauty standards, the deliberate reshaping of the hairline and forehead. Move closer now and observe as Annette approaches with a pair of tweezers and what looks like a small torch with a glowing tip. In Marguerite's time, the ideal female forehead was high, smooth, and completely hairless, not just free of the eyebrows we consider normal today, but plucked back so far that it resembled the dome of an infant's head. This wasn't merely a matter of removing a few stray hairs. This was systematic destruction of the natural hairline, often extending several inches back from where hair would normally grow. The process began in childhood for girls of noble birth. As soon as they were old enough to sit still, mothers would begin the careful work of training their daughters' hairlines backward. Each day, a few more hairs would be plucked, the process so gradual that the child's scalp slowly adapted to the new configuration. But plucking alone wasn't enough for the truly fashionable. To ensure that hair would never grow again in the unwanted areas, many women resorted to more extreme measures. Watch now as Annette heats the tip of a thin metal rod in the flame of a candle. The process she's about to perform has been passed down from mother to daughter, maid to mistress, a secret technique whispered in castle chambers across Europe. The heated metal, glowing red hot, will be touched briefly to each plucked follicle. The searing heat destroys the hair root permanently, ensuring that unwanted growth can never return. The smell of burning flesh mingles with the ever-present scent of wood smoke and beeswax. Marguerite flinches with each touch of the heated metal, but she doesn't cry out. This is simply part of being a woman of her class, part of the price of beauty. The pain is immediate and intense, but it fades. What doesn't fade are the tiny scars left behind, the permanent damage to the scalp that will mark her for life. Some women, after years of this treatment, develop infections that spread beneath the skin. Others lose the ability to grow hair anywhere on their scalp, not just in the areas they wanted to modify. The eyebrows, too, must be addressed. The medieval ideal called for brows so thin they were barely visible, if they existed at all. Using the same tweezers, Annette carefully removes almost every hair, leaving only the faintest suggestion of an arch. The result is a face that looks strangely blank, almost alien to our modern eyes, but perfectly fashionable to the people of Marguerite's time. But the forehead reshaping isn't finished yet. To complete the look, many women applied a paste made from quicklime, essentially concrete, to the hairline. This caustic mixture would burn away any remaining fine hairs and leave the skin smooth and pale. The lime paste had to be applied carefully, left on for just the right amount of time. Too little, and it wouldn't be effective. Too much, and it could eat through the skin entirely, leaving permanent disfigurement. As Marguerite sits perfectly still while this dangerous mixture works on her scalp, she might reflect on the women she knows who have taken this process too far. Lady Catherine, who lost patches of skin and now covers her head entirely with elaborate headdresses. Young Marie, who developed such severe infections that she nearly died, saved only by the intervention of a traveling physician who happened to know something about treating burns. But these cautionary tales don't deter the pursuit of beauty. If anything, they serve as reminders of how high the stakes are. In a world where a woman's appearance could determine her entire future, whom she married, how she was treated, whether she lived in comfort or poverty, any risk seemed worth taking. The morning continues, and we haven't even reached the most dangerous aspects of medieval beauty culture. But already, in just these few hours of preparation, Marguerite has applied poison to her face, compressed her organs into an unnatural shape, and permanently scarred her scalp in pursuit of an ideal that will never love her back. And this, dear listener, is only the beginning. In the chambers and halls ahead of us, we'll discover beauty standards so extreme, so divorced from human nature, that they seem more like elaborate forms of torture than expressions of aesthetics. We'll walk gently through these revelations together, taking our time, breathing slowly, letting the strange truth of the past wash over us like a tide that carries both beauty and horror in equal measure. The candles burn lower now, their warm light flickering across stone walls that have witnessed centuries of such rituals. Somewhere in the castle, other women are undergoing similar transformations, each one believing she is simply doing what must be done, what has always been done, what will always be necessary for survival in a world that judges women first and always by how they look. Chapter 4. The Alchemy of Destruction. Rest for a moment now as we leave Marguerite to her morning preparations. Feel yourself drifting through the castle corridors, your footsteps muffled by rushes scattered across the stone floors. The air grows cooler as we descend a narrow spiral staircase, our hands trailing along walls worn smooth by countless others who have walked this path before us. We emerge into what might charitably be called a laboratory, though it bears little resemblance to anything we might recognize today. This is the domain of the castle's resident alchemist, part physician, part mystic, part merchant of hope in small glass bottles. The room smells of sulfur and roses, burnt herbs, and something metallic that catches in the back of your throat. Along wooden shelves that stretch toward a vaulted ceiling, hundreds of containers hold the ingredients of medieval beauty. Clay pots filled with powdered antimony from distant mountains. Glass vials containing mercury that moves like liquid silver. Cloth bags bulging with lead shavings, their contents heavy as sorrow. Each substance promises transformation, and each one carries death in its embrace. Brother Aldrich, for that is what the castle's inhabitants call this keeper of cosmetic secrets, moves between his shelves with practiced ease. His fingers are permanently stained from handling his materials, his hair prematurely white from breathing vapors that would terrify a modern chemist. He knows the recipes that noble ladies whisper to each other in confidence, the formulas that promise eternal youth and beauty beyond mortal achievement. Watch now as he prepares a special order, a mixture requested by a visiting countess who has heard tales of a preparation so powerful it can erase 20 years from a woman's appearance. Into a marble mortar goes white lead, ground so fine it feels like silk between the fingers. Next, a measure of mercury, its surface creating perfect spheres that roll and merge like drops of molten stars. A splash of vinegar to bind the mixture, and finally, the secret ingredient, that makes this particular formula so coveted. Arsenic, pure and white as fresh snow. The grinding begins, a slow, rhythmic sound that echoes off the stone walls. With each turn of the pestle, these elements merge into something that looks innocent enough. A creamy white paste that could pass for the finest face cream. But we know better now. We understand that beauty in this age was purchased with poison, that every application was a small suicide spread lovingly across the skin. The finished product goes into a small ceramic pot, sealed with wax and marked with symbols that only Brother Aldrich can read. Tomorrow, this mixture will be applied to the face of a woman who believes she is choosing beauty over aging, youth over the natural passage of time. She doesn't know she's choosing madness over sanity, death over life, one careful application at a time. But the alchemist's work isn't finished. On his workbench sits another commission, a hair treatment promised to turn even the darkest locks golden as wheat in summer sunlight. The process begins with something that would horrify us today, yet was as common as washing in medieval Europe. Into a large clay vessel goes human urine, aged until it reaches the perfect strength of ammonia needed for the transformation. The scent fills the chamber, sharp, acrid, impossible to ignore. Yet this liquid gold, as some called it, was the foundation of hair care for centuries. Mixed with wood ash to create lye, it would strip color from hair and scalp alike, leaving both damaged and brittle, but achieving that coveted pale shade that marked a woman as fashionable. To this base, Brother Aldrich adds other ingredients from his collection. Crushed pearls, ground so fine they feel like powder against the fingertips. Saffron, threads worth their weight in gold, their orange essence bleeding into the mixture like sunset captured in liquid form. Honey from the castle's own hives, thick and amber, carrying the memory of summer flowers. The final ingredient makes even Brother Aldrich pause before adding it. Quicklime, caustic enough to eat through flesh if left too long upon the skin, but in small amounts, mixed carefully with the other components, it promises to lift hair color better than any other known substance. The fact that it might also lift the scalp itself seems a reasonable risk to the women who demand such treatments. Chapter 5. The Rituals of Radiance. As Brother Aldrich seals his latest creation, let us drift upward again through the castle's maze of passages. The morning has progressed, and throughout the fortress, other women are beginning their own transformations. Follow the sound of soft voices and gentle laughter to a chamber where several noble ladies have gathered for what they call their beautifying rituals. Lady Eleanor, the castle's chatelaine, presides over this informal gathering with the authority of someone who has mastered every nuance of medieval beauty culture. Around her, younger women listen with the desperate attention of students whose lives depend upon learning these lessons perfectly, and indeed, their lives do depend upon it. The conversation flows like honey, sweet and golden, in the morning light that filters through tall windows. They speak of the visiting merchants who arrived yesterday, their packs bulging with cosmetic treasures from distant lands. There are rumors of a new preparation from the courts of France, a powder so fine it can make a woman appear 20 years younger. Whispers circulate about a visiting Italian lady whose complexion rivals that of a painted Madonna, achieved through methods she guards more carefully than state secrets. But beneath the pleasant chatter runs an undercurrent of competition so fierce it would make a battlefield seem peaceful. Each woman studies the others with eyes trained to detect the slightest advantage, the smallest sign of superior technique or access to better materials. A complexion slightly more luminous than the rest becomes cause for intense scrutiny. Hair that catches the light in a particularly appealing way sparks quiet investigation into methods and sources. Lady Eleanor rises from her chair with practiced grace, moving to a carved wooden chest that dominates one corner of the chamber. The other women fall silent as she lifts the heavy lid, revealing treasures that would bankrupt a small kingdom. Here are cosmetics from Constantinople, their exotic origins whispered in reverent tones. Perfumes from the spice markets of Venice, their scents promising romance and mystery. Hair ornaments crafted by the finest jewelers in Paris, each piece worth more than a peasant family might earn in a lifetime. But the most prized possessions in Lady Eleanor's collection aren't the obviously expensive items. No, the real treasures are the small, unmarked containers that hold her secret formulations. These are the recipes passed down through generations of noble women, refined through centuries of experimentation, perfected through the sacrifices of countless predecessors who served as unwitting test subjects. One such container holds what Lady Eleanor calls her morning dew, a mixture so complex it requires 3 days to prepare properly. The base is distilled water collected from rose petals at dawn, when the flowers are heavy with moisture, and their essence is said to be most potent. To this ethereal foundation are added ingredients that would make a modern person recoil in horror. Ground beetles, their iridescent shells powdered to create a shimmer that catches candlelight like trapped starshine. The rendered fat of young lambs, chosen for its supposed purity and ability to penetrate the skin. Crushed pearls from the distant Orient, their calcium carbonate promising to brighten and smooth the complexion. And finally, the ingredient that gives this preparation its legendary power: white lead, ground so fine it seems to glow with its own inner light. The application ritual begins with prayer, for these women understand that they are engaging in something that borders on the mystical. Lady Eleanor's maid, a woman who has served 3 generations of noble ladies and learned their secrets through decades of careful observation, approaches with the reverence of a priestess approaching an altar. First comes the cleansing, performed with water so hot it leaves the skin pink and tender. Then the preparation of the canvas, a gentle massage with oils that smell of lavender and rosemary, herbs chosen as much for their spiritual properties as their physical effects. The women believe that beauty must begin in the soul, that outer radiance reflects inner purity. Only then does the real transformation begin. Watch now as the maid applies Lady Eleanor's morning dew with a brush made from the finest sable hair. Each stroke is deliberate, careful, building up layers of luminosity that seem to emanate from within the skin itself. The lead-based mixture settles into every pore, creating a finish so smooth and perfect it looks almost supernatural. But this is only the beginning of Lady Eleanor's morning routine. Next comes the careful application of color. Rouge made from cinnabar, applied so subtly it might be mistaken for natural flush. Lips tinted with a preparation that contains enough mercury to slowly poison the user, yet creates a shade of red so perfect it seems to glow with inner fire. The other women watch this demonstration with the intense focus of scholars studying a master's technique. They memorize every gesture, every proportion, every subtle variation that makes the difference between competent application and true artistry. Tomorrow, they will attempt to recreate these effects in their own chambers, guided by maids who may or may not possess the skills necessary to achieve such perfection. Chapter 6. The Architecture of Anguish. Now, let us step away from these morning rituals and move deeper into the castle, following corridors that grow narrower and darker as we progress. The air here carries different scents, not the roses and spices of the noble quarters, but something earthier, more immediate. We are approaching the workshops where the tools of beauty are crafted, where the instruments of transformation are forged in fire and shaped by hands that understand both creation and destruction. In a chamber lit by the orange glow of a forge, craftsmen work at their anvils with the focused intensity of artists creating masterpieces. But their art is not sculpture or painting. It is the fashioning of devices designed to reshape the human form according to the demands of fashion. The sound of hammers on metal creates a rhythm that echoes through the stone walls, a percussion symphony accompanying the creation of beauty's instruments. Master Willem, the castle's most skilled metalworker, examines a commission that has occupied his attention for weeks. It appears to be a garment, but one made entirely of metal. Thousands of tiny links connected with the precision of chainmail, yet designed not for battle, but for the more subtle warfare of appearance. This is a corset in its earliest form, a cage of metal and determination, designed to compress the female torso into shapes that nature never intended. Each link has been forged individually, heated until it glows like a fallen star, then shaped with tools passed down through generations of craftsmen. The metal must be strong enough to withstand enormous pressure, yet fine enough to be worn beneath clothing without creating obvious bulk. It is a technical challenge that pushes medieval metallurgy to its limits. But the true artistry lies not in the construction itself, but in the understanding of human anatomy that guides it. Master Willem has studied the female form with the dedication of a physician, learning how ribs can be compressed, how organs can be shifted, how the very architecture of the body can be modified through sustained pressure and carefully applied force. The finished garment, when complete, will be lined with silk and padded with down to make it bearable against the skin. But beneath these comforting touches lies an engine of transformation so powerful it can literally reshape bone and cartilage over time. Women who wear such devices from adolescence onward develop skeletal structures that conform to fashion's demands. Their bodies permanently altered to match the ideal silhouette of their era. In another corner of the workshop, apprentices work on devices that seem more suited to a torture chamber, then a lady's dressing room. These are the tools of hair modification. Heated irons designed to curl or straighten locks according to the whims of fashion, metal combs with teeth sharp enough to scrape away unwanted growth, and most ominously, a collection of thin rods that glow red hot in the forger's heart. These implements serve the forehead-shaping rituals we witnessed earlier, but seeing them created makes their purpose even more chilling. Each rod is crafted to a specific temperature and thickness, designed to deliver just enough heat to destroy a hair follicle without burning through the skin entirely. The margin for error is measured in degrees and seconds, and the consequences of miscalculation are written in scars across the foreheads of countless women who dared to pursue perfect beauty. Watch now as Master Willem tests one of these devices, touching its heated tip to a piece of leather. The hide sizzles and contracts, filling the air with the acrid smell of burning protein. This same tool, wielded by steady hands in a lady's chamber, will touch human flesh dozens of times, creating the high, smooth forehead that marks a woman as fashionable. The leather curls and blackens under the heat, a preview of what human skin endures in beauty's service. But perhaps the most disturbing creations in this workshop are the measuring devices, tools designed to quantify and standardize the feminine form according to mathematical principles derived from classical art and contemporary fashion. These instruments treat the human body as an engineering problem to be solved, reducing women to a series of proportions and angles that can be adjusted through mechanical intervention. A wooden framework resembling a medieval version of a dress form stands against one wall, but this is no simple mannequin. It is adjustable, capable of being set to the exact proportions deemed most beautiful in any given season. Women would stand within this frame while dressmakers and their assistants measured the gap between ideal and reality, then designed garments and understructures to bridge that difference. The measurements recorded in the workshop's ledgers tell stories of systematic body modification that span generations. Waist sizes that decrease year by year as corsetry grows more sophisticated and social pressure intensifies. Hip measurements that vary according to fashion's decree, expanded with padding when curves are desired, compressed when the ideal shifts toward a more linear silhouette. These numbers represent more than statistics. They chronicle the slow transformation of the human form under cultural pressure, documenting how far women were willing to go in pursuit of an ideal that existed more in imagination than in nature. Each measurement is a small surrender, a step further away from the body that biology provided and toward the shape that society demanded. As evening approaches and the forge fire burns lower, Master Willem and his apprentices clean their tools and prepare for another day of crafting beauty's implements. Tomorrow will bring new commissions, new challenges in the endless quest to make the human form conform to inhuman standards. The workshops will fill again with the sound of hammers and fire, creating devices that promise transformation and deliver something closer to systematic torture disguised as fashion. But tonight, as shadows lengthen and candles are lit throughout the castle, these tools rest quietly in their appointed places. The metal corsets hang like empty shells, waiting for living flesh to fill and reshape them. The heated rods cool in their stands, their power temporarily dormant. The measuring devices stand silent and still, their judgment suspended until morning brings fresh opportunities to find the human form wanting and in need of correction. And somewhere in the castle's upper chambers, women sleep fitfully in beds warmed by braziers, their faces gleaming with preparations that promise beauty and deliver poison, their bodies compressed into shapes that make comfortable rest impossible, their dreams filled with visions of perfection that grow more distant with each passing day. Chapter 7. The Merchant's Deadly Wares. Let your breathing slow now as we drift like smoke through the castle's lower chambers, following the scent of exotic spices and foreign mysteries. The morning has given way to afternoon, and in the great courtyard below, merchants have begun to arrive with their precious cargo. These are not ordinary traders selling grain or wool, but specialists in beauty's most dangerous arts. Traveling apothecaries who carry transformation in small bottles and death in delicate pouches. Picture yourself now standing in the shadows of a stone archway, watching as these purveyors of vanity arrange their wares on wooden tables covered with rich cloth. The autumn air carries the mingled scents of their offerings, cinnamon from distant Ceylon, frankincense that has traveled the silk roads, and underneath it all, something metallic and sharp that makes the throat constrict slightly when breathed too deeply. Master Giovanni, a Venetian merchant whose family has traded in beauty's ingredients for 5 generations, supervises the unpacking of his most valuable goods. His weathered hands, stained permanently black from handling antimony and lead compounds, move with practiced reverence as he arranges containers that represent fortune spent and lives risked in their acquisition. Each item tells a story of distant markets, treacherous journeys, and the insatiable hunger of noble ladies for anything that promises to halt time's passage. The centerpiece of his display is a collection of glass vials, each one no larger than a child's fist, containing what he calls liquid moonlight. The substance within glows with an opalescent sheen that seems to capture and hold the afternoon sunlight, creating patterns that dance and shift like trapped aurora. This is his most prized formulation, white lead ground so fine it achieves an almost supernatural smoothness. Suspended in a solution of vinegar, rose water, and something he never names, but which costs more than silver to obtain. Lady Marguerite approaches the merchant's stall with the careful gait of someone whose clothing restricts natural movement. Her morning transformation is complete, her face now a pale canvas that catches the light like polished marble, her forehead gleaming and unnaturally high beneath her silk veil. But even perfection, it seems, can be improved upon, and she has heard whispers of Master Giovanni's legendary preparations. The merchant bows deeply, his eyes never quite meeting hers directly, not from shyness, but from the practiced understanding that looking too closely at a noble lady's face might reveal imperfections she prefers to keep hidden. Instead, he focuses on his wares, allowing his voice to paint pictures of transformation more complete than any mirror could show. "My lady," he murmurs in accented French, his words soft as silk against the afternoon air. "I bring you gifts from the workshops of angels. This preparation here," he gestures to the luminous vials, "contains the essence of 13 different metals, each one chosen for its ability to capture and reflect divine light. Applied each morning for the span of a moon cycle, it will render your complexion so radiant that men will weep to look upon you." What he doesn't mention, what no merchant of his trade would ever admit, is that those 13 metals include quantities of mercury, arsenic, and lead, sufficient to slowly destroy both mind and body. The divine light his preparation captures is actually the glow of toxicity, the luminescence of slow poison working its way through living tissue. But Lady Marguerite listens with the desperate attention of someone who has already sacrificed so much for beauty that retreat seems impossible. She has spent her morning applying lead to her face, compressing her ribs until breathing becomes an act of will, and burning away her natural hairline with caustic substances. What is one more risk when weighed against the possibility of achieving perfection? Master Giovanni continues his subtle seduction, reaching for another container that seems to glow with inner fire. And this, my lady, is the secret of the Duchess of Milan's legendary youth. She is 60 years of age, yet appears no more than 25. The preparation contains powdered pearls from the depths of the Indian Ocean, ground so fine they become one with the skin itself, creating a luminosity that seems to emanate from within. The truth is more prosaic and infinitely more dangerous. The preparation does contain pearl powder, but the luminous effect comes primarily from white arsenic, chosen for its ability to create a translucent, porcelain-like finish. The Duchess of Milan, if she exists at all, has likely paid for her youthful appearance with tremors, hair loss, and the kind of stomach pains that physicians attribute to an excess of bile, but which we now know as the early stages of heavy metal poisoning. Yet, Lady Marguerite reaches for her purse, weighing the cost of these preparations against the value of continued beauty. The prices Master Giovanni quotes would support a peasant family for years. But what is gold compared to the assurance of remaining desirable, marriageable, relevant in a world that discards women the moment their faces show the first signs of time's passage? Chapter 8. The Sacred and the Profane. As the afternoon light begins to slant lower through the castle's tall windows, let us follow the soft rustle of silk and the whisper of slippered feet as Lady Marguerite makes her way toward the castle's chapel. In medieval Europe, beauty and spirituality were intertwined in ways that seem almost incomprehensible to our modern minds, creating paradoxes that trapped women between the demands of heaven and earth. The chapel itself is a masterpiece of stone and colored glass, where afternoon sunlight transforms the air into streams of ruby, sapphire, and gold. The scent of incense hangs heavy in the cool air, mixing with the beeswax of countless candles and something else. The collective breath of women who have come here not just to pray, but to negotiate the impossible balance between vanity and virtue that defines their existence. Brother Thomas, the castle's chaplain, stands before the altar preparing for vespers, his movements slow and ceremonial in the colored light. He is a man caught in his own contradiction, for while his sermons regularly condemn the vanity of women's beauty practices, he cannot help but notice that the most generous contributors to his chapel's coffers are often those ladies whose faces glow with the telltale sheen of expensive cosmetics. Lady Marguerite genuflects carefully, her metal-reinforced garments making the simple act of kneeling a complex negotiation between devotion and physical limitation. Around her, other women arrange themselves in similar poses, their faces uniform in their alabaster perfection, their bodies shaped into identical silhouettes by the demands of fashion. They have come to pray, but also to display themselves to each other and to God, hoping that their carefully constructed beauty might somehow reflect inner grace. The prayers they murmur are themselves contradictory, asking for forgiveness for the sin of vanity while simultaneously begging for the continued blessing of physical attractiveness. "Grant me humility," they whisper, while their faces bear witness to hours of careful application of toxic cosmetics. "Help me to value inner beauty above all else," they plead, while their bodies are compressed and reshaped by devices that would make a torturer blush. Brother Thomas begins the service with a reading from St. Paul about the proper comportment of women, his voice echoing off stone walls that have heard these same words countless times. He speaks of modesty, of the danger of adorning oneself too richly, of the spiritual perils that await those who place too much emphasis on temporal beauty. Yet his eyes cannot help but linger on Lady Eleanor, whose recent purchase of Venetian cosmetics has left her complexion so luminous it seems almost supernatural in the chapel's colored light. The sermon that follows is a masterwork of theological gymnastics, simultaneously condemning and condoning the very practices that fill his congregation. He speaks of the body as a temple that must be kept clean and presentable for God's service, while carefully avoiding any mention of the fact that keeping it presentable involves the daily application of known poisons. He praises the virtue of women who take care with their appearance as a sign of respect for their Creator, while ignoring the suffering required to achieve such perfection. The women listen with the practiced attention of those who have learned to extract permission from prohibition, to find loopholes in moral instruction that allow them to continue pursuing the beauty their world demands. When Brother Thomas speaks of caring for God's creation, they hear justification for their elaborate cosmetic rituals. When he mentions the importance of not causing scandal through slovenly appearance, they understand this as divine endorsement of their most extreme practices. During the offertory, Lady Margaret rises carefully to place her donation in the collection box, a sum that represents a significant portion of her monthly allowance, but which she considers a necessary investment in spiritual insurance. If her beauty practices are sinful, perhaps generous giving can balance the scales. If her pursuit of physical perfection has compromised her soul, Perhaps the church's blessing can restore what has been lost. The other women watched this display of piety with calculating eyes, noting not just the amount of Lady Marguerite's contribution, but the way the candlelight catches the subtle luminescence of her face powder. Each observes the others, comparing techniques, noting innovations, filing away details that might prove useful in tomorrow's beauty rituals. Even in this sacred space, the competition for perfect appearance continues. As the service reaches its conclusion, Brother Thomas offers a final blessing that inadvertently captures the central tragedy of medieval beauty culture. May you find peace in accepting yourselves as God made you, he intones, his words echoing off stone walls while addressing women who have spent fortunes and endured agony to become anything but what God made them. Chapter 9. The Evening's Dark Revelations. Now let the dying light of day guide us toward the castle's most private chambers, where the true cost of beauty's pursuit becomes visible in the gentle glow of evening candles. As darkness settles over the stone walls like a familiar cloak, the masks of perfection maintained throughout the day begin to slip, revealing truths that daylight helps to hide. In Lady Eleanor's private chambers, her maid works with practiced efficiency to begin the complex process of undressing her mistress. Each layer of clothing that falls away tells its own story of suffering endured for the sake of appearance. The outer gown, when lifted over her head, reveals the deep impressions left by its weight and structure. The metal-reinforced bodice, when finally unlaced, allows Lady Eleanor's compressed organs to shift back toward their natural positions with audible relief. But it is when the face paint begins to come away that the true price of daytime perfection becomes apparent. The maid works carefully with cloths soaked in a solution of rose water and lemon juice, each gentle swipe revealing more of the damage that lies beneath the porcelain facade. Where the lead-based cosmetics have been applied day after day, the skin has begun to take on a grayish cast. The natural pigmentation altered by constant exposure to toxic metals. Small lesions mark the places where the mercury-laden rouge has been applied most frequently, tiny ulcers that never quite heal because they are reopened each morning with fresh applications of poison. The hairline, artificially shaped through years of plucking and burning, shows patches of permanent scarring where the scalp has never recovered from its repeated trauma. Lady Eleanor examines her reflection in a silver mirror, noting changes that would be invisible to casual observers, but which mark the progression of beauty's slow destruction. Her teeth, once white and strong, have begun to loosen in their sockets, a consequence of the lead that has leached from her cosmetics into her bloodstream. Her hands, when she holds them up to the candlelight, show the faint tremor that speaks of mercury poisoning working its way through her nervous system. Yet, even as she catalogs these signs of deterioration, she cannot imagine abandoning the practices that cause them. To appear in public without her cosmetic mask would be social suicide, marking her as either desperately poor or dangerously eccentric. The lead may be slowly killing her, but to stop using it would be to die socially, which in her world amounts to the same thing. In chambers throughout the castle, similar scenes play out as other women confront the private reality of their public beauty. Lady Catherine, whose pursuit of the perfect pale complexion has left her with chronic stomach pains and episodes of confusion that her physician attributes to an excess of melancholy. Young Marie, barely 16, whose experiments with hair lightening preparations have left patches of her scalp permanently bald and scarred. And so, our gentle journey through medieval Europe's chambers of beauty draws to its close, like candles burning low in stone corridors. We have walked together through halls where perfection was purchased with poison, where youth was bought with years of life, where the pursuit of an impossible ideal consumed everything it promised to preserve. These women, trapped between survival and suffering, remind us that beauty's true cost is often hidden beneath its shimmering surface. As you drift toward sleep tonight, perhaps you'll carry with you the whisper of their stories, the echo of their struggles, and the quiet wisdom that comes from understanding how far we have traveled from those distant candlelit chambers of medieval vanity.